Alright, I'm here in a place called Saunders Field in the middle of Virginia. Back behind me, about 10-15 miles, is the town of Fredericksburg, and this whole place in May of 1864, this whole field, would have been a battlefield during the Battle of the Wilderness. I'm in the middle of the wilderness, a 70 square mile area of trees, or at least it used to be until it was developed very recently. All that's left of it is the parts that the National Park Service preserved, and this happens to be one. Now, the reason I'm here is not because of the Battle of the Wilderness. I've already been here to talk about the major battle. But just that way, in those trees, on May 10th of 1864, would have been stationed the 4th Michigan Volunteers. The 4th Michigan Volunteers were formed in Adrian, Michigan in June of 1861. Many of them coming from the southern Michigan area, particularly from Hillsdale County. Now, many of the men that came from Hillsdale County were either students of, or students at, or alumni of Hillsdale College, the main educational institution in Hillsdale County, both now and then. Two of those men I'm going to talk a little bit about with you today. One of them is named LeFleur. He's from Michigan. He's about in his 20s. I believe he's something like 25. And the other guy is a guy named Luce, about the same age, both from Michigan. Now, both of these guys, they're Hillsdale College students. They're fairly literate guys. They know what they're doing. In order to get into Hillsdale, you have to know, I believe, both Latin and Greek fluently, or at least enough to read it. It's a prerequisite for entering into the college. So these guys are not dumb. However, despite their talents, they have enlisted for the grunt job, the infantry, the 4th Michigan Volunteers. And not only that, but they have decided not to try and go for an officer's commission. Both of them are either just regular enlisted men or NCOs. Despite their talents. You know, like in the Civil War, it wasn't exactly hard to become an officer. You either had to have money or you had to be smart. And, you know, in an army that was millions and millions of men strong, you needed a lot of smart or rich men. And these two, Luce and LeFleur, both filled that secondary category. And yet they decided not to try and become officers so that they could fight for their country right where it mattered, on the front lines. Anyhow, May 10th, 1864, the 4th Michigan Volunteers emerges from those woods behind me and starts coming across Saunders Field, marching the same path that I'm doing right now. You can see the road over there. The Orange Turnpike, as it used to be called, is now called Constitution Highway because it goes to James Madison's house. But marching through the field towards the sun, or more specifically, if I can change the camera a little bit, the ridge there. There's a ridge. Why are they advancing in battle line towards a ridge? You guessed it. There's Confederates up there. And those guns that they have need to be silenced. So it comes down to the 4th Michigan. Oh, jeez. Oh, mud again. Darn. Comes down to the 4th Michigan and the rest of General Warren. Oh, gosh. I'm forgetting his name now. Governor K. Warren's 5th Corps to take this ridge and secure what is now Constitution Highway as a route of advance for the Union Army toward Richmond. Gosh, this field is awful to cross. There's so much mud here. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, it's May, so it wouldn't have nearly been this cold, but they're advancing through Saunders Field. Let's just make it to the other side of this little river here, and now we're out. Okay. Yeah, there's a drainage creek that runs through the middle of Saunders Field that I probably shouldn't have marched through, but I did anyway. So now my shoes are wet, but worth it for history, right? Anyhow, they get through and they're advancing towards this ridge under heavy Confederate fire from the troops of General Ewell's, I believe, Confederate 3rd Corps. Artillery, muskets, pistols, anything the Confederates have, they're throwing at the Union troops. The Union troops keep advancing the very same way I am towards this ridge here, taking heavy casualties as they go. The 4th taking a number of casualties on their way up. At this point, though, right about at this point where I'm standing, that's when they start coming under the musket and pistol fire. Mostly musket fire, let's be honest. There weren't that many pistols, just the officers had them. But, so this is where the 4th and the others would have started taking much higher levels of casualties. Now, the 4th makes it up the ridge to a position about 20 yards in front of me. And I'm going to walk up there for the sake of accuracy's sake. All right, let's come on. Lots of prickly, lots of prickly plants. Not exactly the fun kind of prickly plants either, if there is such a thing. Oh, this is going to take a little bit of effort to pick all the thorns out of my pants here once I'm up. Oh. This would have been actually, so this field would not have been as hectic to cross as it is now back in the day, because this would have been a well-kept farmer's field. It's called Saunders Field for a reason. It's because that's the guy who owned it and farmed the land. So it would have been a wheat field at the time of the war, I believe. Though the wheat wouldn't have been very high, since it was just past planting season in the spring. All right, I've arrived. I am at where the 4th Michigan would have been standing. Right over there is the Confederate front line. I'm gonna keep going over there because, well, that's my way home, but also because I want you to see these trenches because there's something serious. So, the 4th Michigan gets up here, halts at about where I'm standing, and starts opening fire over these low hedges towards the Confederates. They're taking heavy fire, point blank from the cannons, and at about 25 to 30 yards from the muskets. At those close ranges, it's hard to miss. And the 4th Michigan and the Confederates are taking very effective fire from each other. For about 2 hours, the 4th Michigan and the rest of Warren's 5th Corps deployed out across this whole field here. You can see I was down over there when I started this video. This whole field, it's about a mile long, I think. Or no, it's like 650 yards. Oh gosh. I used to have the measurements when I wrote the script for the first episode of my radio show, but I've somewhat forgotten them now. Anyhow, they're exchanging fire, and eventually, right as the Union troops are about to be able to start breaking through the Confederate line, a Confederate counterattack that originated in these woods in front of the camera there, pushed towards the Confederate right flank, took out the Union troops attacking that part of the line in the woods about a half a mile that way. The counterattack turned and started heading back down the trench line, which you can see right here. These are Confederate trenches. Started heading down the trench line and emerged from this set of woods here on the flank of the Union Army. The counterattack, plus the deadly Confederate fire coming from these trenches here, forces the Union troops to retreat all the way back across the cornfield, or not the cornfield, sorry, the field, into those woods. where they had started the attack about 2.5 hours before. Now, when this happened, the 4th and the rest of the 5th Corps took a lot of casualties. In the range of about 50%. Here's these Confederate trenches that I was telling you about. They're no joke either. They would have been taller in the day. They're about 3 feet deep right now. And this one's filled with water. This is actually eerily reminiscent of the trenches of Spotsylvania. They would have been filled with water during that battle too. But that's beside the point for now. So they retreat all the way across the field, losing about 50% of their men, including, for the 4th Michigan, their commander. It leaves a lot of wounded and dying men, wounded, dead, and dying men here on these fields just in front of us. Now, remember those 2 guys I was telling you about earlier? A guy named Moses Luce and a guy named Asher LeFleur. Moses Luce, he is unwounded, and he has made it all the way back across the field under heavy Confederate fire to those woods, to his trenches that he started the attack in. He makes it there when he hears from one of his college friends that a guy named LeFleur is calling for him. Moses Luce, he asks where the calls were coming from, and the guy said, all the way back on the other side of the field. I couldn't find you before we got back to our own lines to tell you. What were the calls for? Luce asks. And the guy says, well, I think he's wounded. Moses Luce, Asher LeFleur is one of his better friends, one of the only men in the regiment of about 20 to hail from Hillsdale College, just like Luce. And he wants to preserve as many Hillsdale College students' lives, especially friends' lives, as he can during this awful, God-forbidden war, right? And Luce decides, you know what? I'm going to go try and save him. Asher LeFleur is about 20 yards in front of this camera right now, right about there, in that set of bushes. Wouldn't have been bushes at the time, but he would have been there. Luce is on the other side of this field. He's got about 500 yards to cover before he can even get within hearing range of Asher LeFleur. He doesn't know exactly where he is. He just knows that he's somewhere near this Confederate line. Luce, in probably the bravest decision of just about anyone in this field, takes up his gun and runs back out into the field trying to find his friend Asher. He runs basically the whole distance of what I've just walked, plus about 100 yards, up to the crest of this ridge here, just below us. The Confederates, for the first 200 yards, about 30 seconds or so of running, or no, not really. I mean, like a minute of running, right? Usain Bolt can do like 100 meters in 30 seconds. So let's give Luce, the benefit of the doubt. Let's give him like a minute and a half. The Confederates are firing at him from these trenches here. Muskets, cannonballs, shells exploding in the air. They're throwing everything at the remaining Union troops in Saunders Field. Most of them headed back towards those woods, but one coming right for them. The Confederates keep firing until they see Luce drop his gun. He drops his gun to run faster. The Confederates realize at that point that Luce is not there to fight. He is there to rescue someone. And the Confederates stop firing. Luce runs up all the way to where Asher LeFleur is resting, if you can call it that, wounded very badly in the leg on this ridge here, about 20 yards in front of the camera. Luce is calling around Asher's name. He's yelling, Asher, Asher, where are you? He's trying to look for him. And then he hears from those bushes just in front of you, Luce, Luce, I'm dying here. He recognizes the voice and, of course, the name recognition, and runs over to get his friend Asher. He picks him up, takes him over his shoulders, and runs back across the field, this time not being shot at. Because the Confederates, of course, see that he's carrying out a wounded comrade. And back in those days, chivalry was still a thing. Luce made it back all the way to the other side of those woods without being harmed, with his friend Asher in tow, picking up his gun along the way back. Asher LeFleur would have likely died that day had Luce not picked him up and took him back to the lines before carrying him all the way back about another half mile through the dense brush to a Union field hospital. If it had not been for Moses Luce, Asher LeFleur would have died that day, as did many other men not as fortunate on this hill. But Luce saved Asher LeFleur, and Asher LeFleur survived the war, though I believe he had his leg amputated at a hospital just a few miles down the road from here in a place called Spotsylvania, where the armies moved just a few days later. Moses Luce, along with the rest of the 4th Michigan, would be discharged from the army a few weeks later in June of 1864. The regiment having suffered horrifying, appalling losses at both the Wilderness and at the subsequent Battle of Spotsylvania. Luce would survive both encounters unwounded and would return back to Michigan in 1864 and resume his studies at Hillsdale College, graduating as part of the class of 1866. However, before he graduated, a bill was passed through the Congress authorizing the awarding of hundreds of medals of honor. In the entire history of the United States, something like 2,200 Congressional Medals of Honor have been awarded to soldiers of the United States. Over half of them, over 1,000, were awarded to troops that fought in the Civil War. 3 of those 1,000 medals, or abouts, 3 of those medals were awarded to Hillsdale College students. One of them being Moses Luce. His citation is credited here at Laurel Hill, Virginia, though most people, when you see stories of Moses Luce, they say he earned his medal at Laurel Hill, Virginia. No, he earned his medal here at Saunders Field as part of the Battle of the Wilderness. For his brave actions that day in rescuing a friend, braving enemy fire for half of the journey, and, again, not inaccurate enemy fire, very concentrated and effective enemy fire from men who had been fighting for the Confederate Army for nearly 4 years. Men who had fought in every major battle of the Civil War. Some of the most experienced soldiers in the world at the time. Yet, he braved their fire to rescue his friend. For that, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. And so, he would be one of those 3 Hillsdale students awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor during the Civil War. Again, he went to Hillsdale, finished his studies, graduated in 1866. One of the only Medal of Honor winners to actually graduate, right, as a Medal of Honor winner from Hillsdale College. He would go on to be one of the pivotal players in the founding of the city of San Diego in Southern California. And that's where his main legacy lies. If you know the name Luce, you're almost certainly from San Diego, or, if you're like me, from Hillsdale. It's an amazing thing to be able to visit places like this. Places of such historic significance. Trenches still here, 160 years later. And it's amazing to think that just in these fields, right here, one of Hillsdale's most famous Medal of Honor winners, Moses Luce, earned that honor. Merry Christmas, and have a great 2021. Seeing you from 2020.